What would you do if you came home early one day, expecting nothing but a quiet evening, and instead walked into a scene that destroyed everything you believed about your marriage? What would you do if the person betraying you wasn't a stranger, but someone who sat at your dinner table, someone who was supposed to be family? I never thought I would have to answer that question. But life has a way of forcing you into moments you never prepared for, and the answer you give in those moments reveals who you really are. My name is Robert. Before all of this happened, I believed my life was ordinary in the best way. I had a steady job, a wife I came home to every evening, and a routine I went through for years in my marriage. We lived close to my wife's family, which I once thought was a blessing because it meant we had people around us who cared and I could count on no matter what. I believed that loyalty was something you didn't have to question when love and family were involved. That belief shaped every choice I made. It shaped how I treated my wife, how I saw our future, and how I measured what was real between us. And it explains why I never imagined what was coming. Before the day everything collapsed, my marriage felt stable. We weren't perfect, and I never claimed we were. We had our minor frustrations, like any couple that has spent years together. Sometimes she seemed distant, and sometimes I didn't have the energy to ask why. Sometimes I worked late and came home too tired to talk. We didn't argue often, and when we did, the arguments didn't turn ugly. No one threw things. No one slammed doors. No one said words designed to wound. We disagreed, we talked it through, and then we moved on. The ability to fight without falling apart was proof that we had something real. I trusted my wife completely. I never checked her phone or asked to see who she had been texting. I never questioned her schedule or wondered if she was really where she said she was. I never felt threatened by the people around her because I believed those people respected what we had. Her sister's husband was part of the family. He came to dinners. He helped out when we needed an extra set of hands. He was present in our lives. To me, that made him safe by definition. I believed family lines were clear and unbreakable. I thought that being connected by blood or marriage meant something that couldn't be crossed, and that comfort made me blind to everything that was happening right in front of me. However, the warning signs only make sense after the damage is done. When you're living through something day by day, you don't see what's really happening because you're not looking for it. Your mind fills in the blanks with explanations that make sense, explanations that protect the world you've built. Familiarity creates excuses. When you've been with someone for years, when you've watched them in every mood and every situation, you stop questioning the small things. I trusted those excuses because I trusted her. Every explanation I made in my own head was rooted in the faith I had in the person I married. I believed that if something were wrong, she would talk to me. That was the unspoken agreement I thought we had. If there were a problem, we would face it together. If she were unhappy, she would tell me. I believed honesty was automatic in marriage, not something you had to demand or test. The day I came home early wasn't planned. There was no suspicion in my mind, no quiet voice telling me something was wrong. I wasn't checking on her. I wasn't testing her. I was just early. Work had ended sooner than expected, and instead of staying to fill the extra time, I decided to head home. When I opened the front door, nothing felt wrong at first. The house was quiet, but that wasn't unusual. She often had the television off when she was home alone. She liked the silence sometimes. I stepped inside and set my keys down, thinking nothing of it. Then I noticed shoes by the door that didn't belong to me. They were men's shoes, a pair I didn't recognize at first glance. That didn't cause panic. It confused me. My first thought was that someone had stopped by unexpectedly, maybe a family member or a friend. I assumed they had come over. My brain reached for the most straightforward explanation because I didn't assume betrayal. I started walking further into the house. As I walked further inside, my confusion started to shift. I saw clothes on the floor. A shirt I didn't recognize was tossed carelessly near the hallway. That was the moment my chest tightened. Something cold moved through me, but I didn't let it take over yet. I didn't want to believe what my eyes were slowly arranging in front of me. I wasn't ready to accept it. Each step felt heavier than the one before. The silence in the house became louder. When I reached the bathroom door, I heard water running. And then I heard voices. Two voices. One belonged to my wife. The other belonged to a man. That sound stripped away every excuse I had left. My body understood before my mind did. I stood there with my hand on the door handle, knowing that whatever I saw next would change everything, and knowing I couldn't stop myself from opening it. When I opened the bathroom door, I didn't shout. I didn't rush forward or lose control. Steam filled the room, thick and warm, clouding the mirror. My wife was in the tub, and she wasn't alone. Her sister's husband was in there with her. Their bodies were close in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. No explanation could undo what I was seeing. No lie big enough to cover it. No excuse was creative enough to make it something other than what it was. My body went cold before my mind caught up. It felt like time had split in half, like I was standing outside of myself, watching someone else's life collapse while I remained frozen and unable to move. The two of them stared at me with wide eyes. No one spoke at first. The only sound was the water dripping and my own breathing, shallow and tight. That moment didn't feel loud or dramatic. It didn't feel like a movie where the betrayed husband explodes in rage. It felt empty, like everything I thought I knew had been quietly erased, and I was standing in a space that no longer made sense. I moved back and locked the bathroom door from the outside because I didn't want anyone to escape. I needed witnesses. I needed people to see exactly what I had just seen so that no one could rewrite what happened later. I called my wife's sister and told her to come to the house immediately. I didn't explain why. I didn't say what I had found. I just told her it was urgent and that she needed to be here now. Then I stood outside that bathroom door and waited. I didn't insult anyone through the door. I didn't threaten anyone or make promises about what I would do next. I focused on control because losing control in that moment would have destroyed me. Anger was there, deep and burning somewhere in my chest, but I didn't let it drive. Everything else, the love, the trust, the future I thought I was building, was already gone. I opened the front door when she arrived, and that's when I realized she hadn't come alone. My wife's sister stepped inside first, and their mother followed a step behind her. I remember noticing the look on her sister's face before anything else. She was confused, clearly thrown off by the urgency in my voice when I called her. She kept looking at me like she was waiting for an explanation, trying to understand why I looked the way I did. I must have looked empty, like someone who had just watched his life split in two and hadn't figured out how to react yet. I didn't explain anything. I didn't trust my voice, and I didn't want to soften the truth with words. I just turned and walked toward the bathroom, and she followed me, still confused, still unprepared. When I unlocked the door and stepped aside, everything changed. The moment she saw inside, the confusion drained from her face instantly. It was replaced by shock. Her eyes locked on the tub, on her husband, on her sister, and I could tell that whatever version of her life she believed in had just ended. She screamed at her husband first. The words came fast and loud, but I can't tell you precisely what she said. My ears were ringing, and everything sounded distant, as if I were underwater. Then she turned toward her sister, and the screaming changed. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was betrayal. It was disbelief. It was the sound of someone realizing they had been fooled by the people closest to them. Halfway through it, her strength gave out. She slid down against the wall, crying so hard it looked like her body couldn't support the weight of what she'd just learned. In one moment, she lost her marriage and her trust in her own sister. That kind of loss doesn't come in pieces. It hits all at once and stays. Their mother came to the bathroom shortly after hearing the shouting, and her reaction was different from everyone else's. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She went straight into control mode. She kept talking about calming down, about slowing things down, about not making decisions while emotions were high. She talked about the family, about keeping things from getting worse. I watched her closely, and what stood out to me was the fear in her eyes. It wasn't just fear of what had happened. It was the fear of who might find out. Fear of what people would say. She wasn't thinking about what this had done to her other daughter. She was thinking about damage and how to contain it. After they finally left, the house went quiet. My wife and I sat in the living room across from each other, but it no longer felt like a home. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel any sense of victory or justice. I felt empty, completely drained. She tried to talk to me. She cried and said she was sorry. She told me it was a mistake, that it had only happened twice, as if fewer times made it smaller. I listened, but none of it landed. Her words felt like background noise, like a radio playing in another room. I understood the language, but the meaning never reached me. It was like my mind had shut the door to protect itself. I didn't yell at her. I didn't insult her or throw her excuses back at her. When I spoke, it was only a few words at a time. Most of the time, I said nothing at all. I avoided her eyes because looking at her felt wrong, like staring at someone I didn't know but was supposed to recognize. Something inside me had gone cold and quiet. The woman I had trusted, the woman I believed I knew completely, no longer existed in my mind. The person sitting across from me looked like her, sounded like her, but felt empty of everything I once believed she was. I wasn't trying to punish her with silence. I wasn't playing games or attempting to gain control. I simply couldn't reach her anymore. Whatever connected us before was gone. The bridge between us had collapsed in a way that apologies or explanations couldn't repair. Sitting there with her, I understood for the first time that even if we stayed in the same room, we were already living in separate worlds. The weeks that followed were heavy and slow in a way I had never experienced before. Each day felt longer than it should have, like time itself had decided to punish me by stretching every hour into something unbearable. I woke up each morning not because I wanted to, but because my body forced me to. For a brief second, I would forget what had happened. Then it would hit me all over again, like a weight dropping onto my chest before I even had a chance to sit up. I drove to work and did my job, but I couldn't tell you a single thing I accomplished during those weeks. My body was present, but my mind was somewhere else, stuck in a loop I couldn't escape. Food became something I forced down because I knew I needed it to survive. Everything tasted the same, bland and meaningless. At night, I lay in bed while sleep refused to come. I would close my eyes and try to rest, but my brain wouldn't stop. Some nights, I slept for an hour or two. On other nights, I didn't sleep at all. The exhaustion built up inside me until I felt like a shell of the person I used to be. Her family tried to intervene afterwards. They called me on the phone, sometimes multiple times, to check up. They showed up at the house without warning, knocking on the door and asking to talk. They asked me to think about the marriage and consider forgiveness, as if forgiveness was something I could hand over like a gift just because they requested it. They talked about mistakes and second chances. They spoke about the importance of keeping things together, about not throwing away years of history over one incident. They used words like healing and moving forward, as if what had happened were just a bump in the road, a minor setback that could be smoothed over with enough conversation and time. They spoke as if I were the one being unreasonable for not wanting to pretend everything was fine. What they didn't understand was that this wasn't a small mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment that could be corrected with an apology. This was a complete destruction of everything I believed in. The woman I trusted had betrayed me with someone who was supposed to be family. Every time they talked about second chances, I felt more alone. They weren't thinking about what I had lost. They were thinking about appearances. They were thinking about what the situation looked like from the outside. They wanted me to fix it so they wouldn't have to deal with the shame and the mess that came with it. Worse than the memory itself were the details my mind created on its own. I started imagining things I hadn't seen. I imagined how long it had been going on, the excuses they must have invented to steal time together. I imagined the lies they must have told. I imagined moments I had no proof of, but my brain invented them anyway just to torture me. Every time I closed my eyes, new images appeared. I didn't ask for them. I didn't want them. But they came anyway, filling the silence with things I never wanted to picture. I questioned my judgment constantly during that month. I asked myself how I had missed it. I went back through every memory I had, looking for signs I should have noticed, clues I should have caught. I remembered small moments that meant nothing at the time, but now felt like evidence of something I had been too blind to see. I blamed myself for not paying attention. I blamed myself for trusting too easily, for believing that loyalty was something I didn't have to verify. I asked myself what kind of man doesn't notice when his own wife is sleeping with someone else under his nose. The questions never stopped, and the answers never made me feel any better about myself. I wasn't healing during that month. I know that now, and I knew it then too. I was enduring. I was surviving each hour just to get to the next, hoping that eventually the weight would lift, hoping that one morning I would wake up and the pain would be softer than the day before. But it didn't happen. And somewhere deep inside me, I started to realize that getting through wasn't enough. I couldn't live the rest of my life just surviving. Something had to change. Either I would find a way to rebuild what was broken, or I would have to accept that some things can't be rebuilt and walk away before the wreckage buried me completely. One night, about a month after the discovery, I was sitting alone when something became clear to me. In that stillness, the truth arrived quietly, like it had been waiting for me to be calm enough to hear it. I understood something I had been avoiding for weeks. The damage had already been done, and no amount of time or effort could undo it. I thought about what staying would actually look like. I imagined waking up next to her every morning and wondering if she was thinking about him. I imagined watching her leave for work and questioning whether she was really going where she said she was going, and searching her words for lies I might have missed. I would never look at her without seeing what I saw that day in the bathroom. That image would always be there, waiting behind every conversation, every quiet moment, every attempt at normalcy. I would question every silence. I would ask about every phone call, every text message, every time she stepped out of the room. I would doubt every smile she gave me, every word of affection, every reassurance she offered. And that wasn't love. That was survival. That was living in a constant state of suspicion and pretending it was something else. I realized that staying wouldn't save the marriage. It would just stretch out the pain over years instead of months. I would become someone I didn't recognize, someone who monitored his wife's every move, someone who lay awake at night analyzing her behavior, someone who turned bitter and suspicious because he couldn't let go of what had happened. I didn't want to become that man. I didn't want to become a person who spent his life checking his phone, monitoring schedules, and losing sleep over things he couldn't control. I had seen men like that before, men who stayed in broken marriages because they thought leaving made them weak, men who slowly turned into shadows of who they used to be. I didn't want that to be my future. I didn't want to hate the person I became just because I was too afraid to walk away. I made the decision that night that the marriage was over. Not because I wanted it to be, but because it already was. The betrayal had ended it. The lies had ended it. What I saw in that bathroom had ended it. My decision was just the acknowledgement of something that had already happened. Staying would only delay the pain without ever removing it, carrying this weight for years, pretending it didn't exist, and hoping it would get lighter. I didn't want that life. I wanted a life where I could look at myself in the mirror and respect the man I saw. And I knew, with a certainty that felt both painful and freeing, that the only way to get there was to let go of the life I had lost and start building something new. The divorce was slow and painful in ways I didn't expect. I thought once I made the decision, the hard part would be over. I thought the clarity I found that night before the divorce would carry me through the rest of it. But I was wrong. The legal process dragged on for months, filled with paperwork, meetings, and conversations I didn't want to have. There were arguments over things that once seemed small, things that didn't matter when we were together, but suddenly became battlegrounds when we were splitting apart. We argued about who owed what to whom, and how to divide years of shared life into two separate piles. Every conversation felt exhausting because it reminded me that the life I thought I was building had been hollow the entire time. I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was dismantling something I had poured years of effort into piece by piece, and each piece carried its own weight of memory and regret. There was pressure from her family that didn't stop even after I made my decision clear. They told me I was being too harsh. They acted as if I was the one causing the damage, as if my refusal to stay and suffer in silence was somehow worse than what had been done to me. I listened to their words, and I understood what they were really saying. They didn't want the family to break apart. They didn't want to deal with the shame of 2 divorces happening at once. They weren't thinking about me. They were thinking about themselves, about appearances, about keeping things neat, even if it meant I had to swallow my pain and pretend it didn't exist. There were moments of emotional manipulation that caught me off guard. My wife would cry and tell me she couldn't live without me. She would promise to do whatever it took to make things right. She would remind me of the good times, of the years we had spent together, of the dreams we once shared. And for a moment, those words would land somewhere soft inside me, and I would wonder if I was making a mistake. But then I would remember, and the doubt would disappear because no amount of words could undo what I had witnessed. Apologies don't erase actions. Tears don't rebuild trust. I knew that staying would only give her the chance to hurt me again, and I wasn't willing to offer myself up for that possibility. I listened to people tell me I was giving up. I heard that phrase more times than I could count. Friends, family, even people I barely knew felt entitled to share their opinions on my decision. They told me that marriage requires sacrifice, that forgiveness was the higher path, the mature path, the path that showed strength rather than weakness. They made it sound like walking away was the easy choice. But none of them had stood where I stood. None of them had opened that door and seen what I saw. None of them had to lie awake at night with images they couldn't erase burned into their memory. I knew what I felt, and I knew that staying in that marriage would have destroyed whatever was left of me. For months after the divorce was finalized, my world felt empty. The silence that I once thought would bring peace only reminded me of everything I had lost. I wasn't just grieving the end of my marriage. I was mourning the death of the life I thought I would have. I was grieving the trust one would never get back. I was grieving the man I used to be before all of this happened. I rebuilt my life in small steps, one day at a time. That's the only way it's possible when everything falls apart. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel whole again. You wake up and you get through the day. Then you do it again and again and slowly. So slowly you almost don't notice. Things start to feel less heavy. I started cooking meals I actually wanted to eat. I started going for evening walks just to feel the air on my face. I learned to sit with silence rather than fear it. I knew that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. I realized that there was something valuable in having space to think, space to breathe, space to figure out who I was without someone else defining me. I learned that walking away doesn't mean weakness. That was one of the hardest lessons to accept because everything I had been taught said the opposite. I grew up believing that strong men stay. Strong men fight for their families. Strong men don't quit. But none of that accounts for situations where waiting is what destroys you. Sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes it means choosing not to live in constant doubt. Sometimes it means protecting the part of yourself that still believes you deserve peace. I walked away because I wanted to survive. I walked away because I wanted to respect myself again. And I walked away because I knew that no one else was going to protect me if I didn't defend myself. I am quieter now than I used to be. That's one of the changes I notice most when I think about who I was before and who I am today. I used to talk more freely. I used to share things without worrying about how they would be received. I used to believe that openness was always a good thing, that letting people in was how you built connection and trust. Now I hold more back. I listen more than I speak. I watch how people behave before I decide how much of myself to show them. It's not that I've become cold or distant. It's that I've learned the value of protecting what's inside me until I'm sure it's safe to share. I don't open up as quickly as I once did, and I don't apologize for that. It's a boundary I built with intention, and it keeps me from being hurt the way I was broken before. I trust more carefully now, not because I think everyone will betray me, but because I know that trust is something earned over time. It's not something you hand out freely to anyone who asks for it. It's not something you give away just because someone seems nice or says the right words. Trust has to be built through actions, through consistency, through proving over time that someone is who they claim to be. I used to skip that process. I used to assume that if someone was kind to me, they were trustworthy. I used to believe that being family or being close meant you could be counted on without question. I don't think that anymore. Now I wait. I observe. I pay attention to what people do, not just what they say. And only when their actions match their words over time do I allow myself to let them in. I've learned that loyalty is absolute, but it requires more than just feeling. It requires two people choosing each other every single day, not just one person believing while the other pretends. Loyalty isn't something that exists automatically just because you made a promise once. It's something you have to prove through the way you live. It's something that has to be mutual, with both people holding up their end. I gave my loyalty freely in my marriage. I gave it without question and without condition. And what I learned is that loyalty only works when it's returned. When one person provides everything, and the other takes without giving back, what you have isn't a partnership. It's a trap dressed up as a relationship. I've learned that love without respect is not love. This is something I wish I had understood years ago. I thought love was enough. I thought if two people cared about each other, everything else would fall into place. But that's not true. Love without respect is just comfort disguised as connection. It's a habit dressed up as commitment. It's two people going through the motions because they're afraid to be alone, not because they truly value what the other person brings to their life. Real love has to include respect. It has to include honoring the other person's trust. It has to involve treating them the way you would want to be treated, even when no one is watching. I didn't have that in my marriage, and I won't accept anything less than that again. If someone can't offer me respect alongside their affection, then their affection means nothing. This story didn't just end my marriage. It changed how I see trust entirely. I used to think trust was something solid, something permanent once it was built. Now I understand that trust is fragile. It can be shattered in a single moment, no matter how many years went into creating it. And once it's broken, it doesn't just come back because you want it to. You have to decide whether the pieces are worth picking up, and sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to accept that what was broken cannot be fixed, and to move forward without it. I made that choice, and I don't regret it. The trust one lost in that marriage taught me how to protect the trust one build in the future. This experience changed how I see family, too. I used to believe that family was a word that carried automatic meaning. Being related by blood or marriage should create bonds that couldn't be crossed. I thought family meant safety. I thought it meant loyalty that didn't need to be questioned. But I learned that family is just a word. It doesn't guarantee anything. People can share your last name and still hurt you without hesitation. People can sit at your table and smile at your face and betray you the moment your back is turned. The word family doesn't protect you. Only the actions of the people around you can do that. And now I judge people by how they treat me, not by the title they hold in my life. If someone proves they can be trusted, I treat them like family. If they prove they can't, the fact that we share blood or history means nothing. This story changed how I see myself most of all. I used to believe that doing everything right would protect me from being hurt. I thought if I worked hard, stayed loyal, and kept my promises, then life would be fair to me. But now I know that isn't true. You can do everything right and still end up broken. You can give your best and still be betrayed by the people closest to you. That's not a reason to stop trying. It's just the truth. And accepting that truth has made me stronger in ways I didn't expect. I no longer expect the world to be fair. I just expect myself to act with integrity, no matter what the world gives me in return. But I also know that I survived. When my world crashed down around me, when everything I believed in turned out to be a lie, I didn't fall apart and stay broken. I walked away from a situation that would have destroyed me if I had stayed. I rebuilt my life from the ground up, one small step at a time, until I found solid ground again. I kept going. I didn't give up. And that's the part of this story I hold on to now. And I hold on to the knowledge that no matter what happens next, I have already proven that I can survive.